Earlier today, Houthi rebels in Yemen, backed by Iran, announced they launched missiles towards sensitive military sites in Israel, marking the group's entry into this war. CNN's Eleni Giokos. Good morning to you, Elaine. What do you know? Okay, so there's quite a few things happening here, and we've got, we're a month in, and it feels on this Saturday. We've woken up to what is sort of like an escalation around the region, and this is really a fascinating turn of events. This was perhaps the wild card that everyone was sort of anticipating, because the Houthis have been very vocal in terms of supporting Iran in this war, but very quiet militarily. It's an Iranian-backed proxy group. They have caused havoc in the Red Sea and, importantly, in the Bab al-Mandeb Straits, which is the other huge maritime choke point specifically after October 7th. We know that they can really divert a lot of traffic down the Cape of Good Hope. We're already seeing the Strait of Hormuz that is completely being choked off, causing, incredible crisis on the oil front around the world. And now with this front opening up, where they say they launched a barrage of missiles towards Israel, this is clearly an escalation that we're seeing as we're hoping on the sidelines, that President Trump and even the Iranians might be looking for a diplomatic off-ramp. What is very certain right now that Iran has a strategic hold over the Strait of Hormuz, something the Gulf countries won't accept. And of course, President Trump is trying to get a coalition of countries to try and open that strait up, as we still see strikes across the region. Victor Eleni Giokos setting the table with reporting for us this morning. Thank you. All right, let's talk now about these developments and more. We're joined now by CNN military analyst and retired Colonel Cedric Leighton and CNN global affairs analyst Kimberly Dozier. Good morning to both of you. And Colonel, I want to talk with you about the new player on the board. And those are the Houthis out of Yemen, the Iran-backed rebel group. They fired their first missiles of this war toward Israel as we start the second month of it. First, an official with the group said that closing the Bab al-Mandeb Strait off the coast of Yemen is a viable option. We've focused a lot on the Strait of Hormuz. If they were to exercise that option, how would that change this war? Well, that would be a big change. Victor, good morning to you. There are certain things here that the Houthis have already done and some things that they're talking about doing. So, in this particular case, they've obviously sent a rocket toward Israel that was intercepted. However, if they shut the Bab al-Mandeb, that is going to impact a lot of the global trade in addition to what's already impacted through the Strait of Hormuz, through cutting that off. So if the Bab al-Mandeb is cut, that would then cut the alternate trade route that the Saudis have, at least in part. They could still theoretically go through the Suez Canal, but that is going to be a real problem because there are a lot of ships that go down through the southern aspect and down through the Bab al-Mandeb. So it could have significant impact on basically the alternate route that not only Saudi Arabia, but a lot of the other Gulf countries are using. And if that happens, then you will see even more perturbations in the economies of the Gulf states. For example, medicine and food supplies already being cut in places on the western side of the Persian Gulf. Those supplies could be cut even further if there's no alternate route going into those countries through Saudi Arabia. So it's a potentially significant development. Kim, what do you think explains the Houthis' month-long sideline here in this war? Why they weren't in earlier? And what explains entering at this point of the war? You could say that this is a strategic use of assets by the Iranians. But that sort of denies the Houthis any agency in making this decision. The US and Western campaign against the Houthis when they were regularly rocketing, the Israelis had really hurt the organization. The US unleashed billions of dollars of munitions on the Houthis over the first year, or the opening months of the Trump administration. And so when Hamas and Israel had a ceasefire, it was a good opportunity for the Houthis to bow out. They have been biding their time, but now you see as the Iranians are running out of some of the munitions they have to fire, bringing the Houthis to bear adds pressure. As Cedric was saying, you've got mostly oil and gas shipments out of the Gulf being choked by the Strait of Hormuz. You have a lot of east-west container traffic that comes through the Suez. and around the Bab-and-Dub that would be impacted by this. So you start having a knock-on F.
ECT on global trade, and also Cedric was mentioning the Cape in South Africa, Singapore, etc. The alternate routes and harbors that are being used for this deflected trade are overwhelmed with all the shipping traffic. They're simply not built to take that much. All of that builds the costs, and the Iranians know that really builds the economic pressure on the Trump administration. Let's talk about it now with retired Lieutenant General William Caldwell. He was former commander of the NATO training mission in Afghanistan. Welcome back, General. Let me start here with the Houthis launching this first missile strike. These missiles toward Israel announcing their entrance into the war at the start of the second month. How much could they influence or accelerate this war? Well, it's very interesting. You know, up to now they have remained out of the war because they recognize that if they do just what they did, Israel is probably going to strike back at them now in Yemen itself. In the past, they were a real threat. As you recall, they really did put a choke point on that. You know, there's the Strait of Hormuz, and then as we just talked about, there's the other strait that goes into the Red Sea there. And so those two choke points can really influence the entire flow of economic goods and oil across the world. Yeah. The Bab-and-Dub Strait there, as we see just west of Yemen there. Let me ask you about the progress of the war, because we heard from the president last night at a Saudi investment forum in which he talks about the work that's been accomplished and what is still left to do. Let's play that. It's not finished yet. I'm not saying it's sort of finished, but it's not finished. It's got to be finished. And we have another 3,554 targets left, and that'll be done pretty quickly. And then at some point we're going to have to determine what we do. But they've never seen anything like it. 3,554 targets left. The accuracy of that number aside, is that the right lens through which to look at this conflict account of targets in reaching whether or not the U.S. will reach its goal? Well, I think as we all look at this, what's going on, what we're trying to do is drive them to the negotiating table to cut a deal, as the leadership keeps saying to the United States. We want to bring them to the point where they're willing to talk, look at that 15-point plan again that was presented to them, through the Pakistani government, so that they have the opportunity to, agree to or make concessions so that they won't have a nuclear program again, that they won't have proxies across the Middle East, from Hezbollah to Hamas and the Houthis. And so this negotiation, the pressure that is continuing going to be put on them, will be brought by hitting more and more of those targets. I mean, just yesterday, Israel hit, the two nuclear-associated targets there in Iran, along with steel plants, which the IRGC, their army uses as a pseudo-monetary means of income. That's those kind of things will start having more of an impact and influence what's going to be taking place in the days ahead. Let me ask you about the USS George H.W. Bush aircraft carrier. Sources say that it could be deployed into the region. Now, we don't know if it's going to be added to the Lincoln and the Ford carrier strike groups, or it's going to replace one of them. But do you know enough at this point how to fit that piece into the puzzle? Well, when you look at, we've been at this now for 4 weeks, going into our 5th week, and at this point, the crews on those ships, those task forces have just got to be exhausted. They're going 24/7. They're creating so many sorties every day that are flying over Iran. The planning, the preparation, the support, all the members on those vessels that are then reconstituting the aircraft and getting them set to go again. It's just got to be exhausting. So there's a high probability what they're going to do is rotate one carrier group in and another one out to give it some relief so that they can continue the intensity of the operations. All right, Lieutenant General William Caldwell, thanks so much. Today marks 4 weeks since the start of the war, and there are no signs that the end is in sight. Iran has attacked an airbase in Saudi Arabia used by the U.S. military, injuring at least 10 U.S. troops. Iranian state media released a satellite image showing the damage to Prince Sultan Air Base, amounting to one of the most serious breaches of American air defenses since the start of this growing conflict. We have seen multiple strikes against Gulf countries, But importantly, I want to focus on that attack on the airbase in Saudi Arabia, Prince Sultan Air Base. 10 U.S. service members were injured,